Okay, so let me ask you a question here. This is going to require some speculation on your part, eh? So we might say, well, it's all about winning. And so why not set up the contest so that you can win? And I know this is preposterous. Imagine you wanted to play one-on-one basketball, for entertainment, and you decided that what you were going to do is win. And maybe so you decide to play basketball with I could do this, even though I don't know how to play basketball worth a damn. I could pick my 3-year-old grandson to play basketball against, and I could just stomp the hell out of him, and pretty regularly, right? And pretty convincingly. And I would be the winner. And anyone with any sense would look at that and say, well, that's a pretty pathetic kind of victory there, buddy. Why don't you pick on someone your own size? And anyone with any sense would also point out, well, it's probably the case that if you pick the wrong opponent, which is someone that you can trounce regularly without effort, that's really not going to be very fun. And that's partly because you're not pushing yourself in any real sense. You're not pushing the boundaries. You're not developing yourself. You're certainly not helping them develop. You're demoralizing them. So I could say, well, Riley, why don't you enter yourself into like a swimming contest for girls, but in the 10-year-old division? You could win hands down quite handily, I would presume. You could make quite the fools out of those 10-year-old girls. And so now, and this is what I would like you to speculate on. What kind of mental gymnastics do you think you would have to perform internally so that if you did that and you won, you would think that in any way you were actually a winner? You know what I mean? How do you have to twist and dement yourself to the point where you believe that having done that and accomplishing your aim, which is the devastation of your opponents, that you're now someone who can celebrate themselves? Here's my trophy. And that others celebrate, and that anyone who refuses to celebrate is now bigoted. So what kind of mental state do you have to be in to do that?
I think what that boils down to is, of course, selfishness, entitlement. That's the word I think of when this whole trans movement, it's as if they feel owed something. They feel entitled to winning. And they have an utter disregard towards everyone else, for everyone else's happiness, feelings, safety, privacy, dignity. As long as
discipline, sacrifices,
as
all of the things that you put into this. The thing that I find so utterly appalling about this, although there's many things, is that you really spent, as you said, 18 years preparing yourself for this, and that came at a non-trivial cost. And I'm not feeling sorry for you, but what I am thinking is, well, you were playing a straight game, and the consequence of that was that you were then subjected to a crooked championship, hyper crooked, hyper moralistic. Yeah, and that you were thrown into the ring with someone who's an unrepentant narcissist. And then because of your objections, we're also pilloried morally, which is just, the icing on the cake. Okay, so now you find out that Will, is a man, not was, but is a man. And he's decided that he's a woman, and the people who are enabling this idiot narcissistic delusion have also decided that he's a man. And so now you're facing him in competition. So what sort of shockwaves, let's say, does that send through you psychologically, but also through your team?
It's swimming is, of course, a physical sport. There's several physical aspects that go into it. But just like any sport, there's so much mental that goes into it as well. So I can't even tell you what this distraction, because that's ultimately take away the unfair competition piece. That's ultimately what this was. It was a huge distraction. It was all anyone could talk about. There was so much media attention, which I think we can all agree swimming is not a sport that typically garners media attention. There was awkward whispers on the pool deck of people who felt so uncomfortable and wronged, but didn't feel comfortable enough to say it loudly. There was side eyes, eye movements. There was so much that just kind of made you feel as if you were living in this twilight zone. So that's what that piece looked like from the mental aspect.
So what do you mean living in a twilight zone? What was that like psychologically? I have a specific reason for this, which I'll tell you about. But what do you mean it was like a twilight zone?
It felt as if, in my perspective, 2 years ago, maybe, a man enters a woman's locker room, he's immediately arrested and charged with voyeurism, indecent exposure, sexual harassment. I'm sure the list could go on. But now, not only was it happening, it was being celebrated. It was being encouraged. It just felt as if so quickly, again, maybe I was naive to how rapidly this was happening, or if this had been happening for a while. And now kind of doing more research and studying up on this, I realized it happened quick in a sense, but it's been happening for a while. This was their ultimate goal for a while now.
So there's a marker for traumatic stress, by the way. One of the markers for traumatic stress is a phenomenon called derealization. And so if something happens to you and you can't believe it's happening, then that's a marker for the development of traumatic stress disorders. Now, it's not an invariable marker, but it's a pretty good marker. And so you're talking about a situation where you'd played a straight game and were in a straight game for 18 years. And then one of the most fundamental rules of the game was flipped. And not only with regards to swimming, and that's not nothing because you devoted your life to it, and so had your teammates, but also with regards to the locker room. Because, right, there's two things going on here. Not only are you competing against Will Thomas, who now calls himself Leah and has his idiot acolytes going along with that, but there's the locker room issue too. So let's fast forward to the competition itself. Tell me about the locker room situation, and then also tell me about what it was like to compete that day.